Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. And the wild world in which we live is kind of the preface for each episode. We're approaching it from some direction, and today we're going to approach it from hurry. Over the weekend, I saw a video that I wanted to watch about something like 5 skills to be productive. And I'm like, I'd like to be productive, so I clicked on it. And the very first thing that the guy said was hurry. Whenever possible, hurry. Which I thought was very interesting because I knew that we were going to have on the show today Kelsey Luckasevic joining us again. And we are talking about a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by Kelsey. Who's it by?
John Mark Comer.
John Mark Comer. Thank you, Kelsey.
Hello, John.
Also, welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you.
So we're going to be talking about this book and its countercultural approach to life and faith. And it's actually something that we talked about prior to the episode we recorded about your story. Mm-hmm. And quickly realized we should probably do an episode on this because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
In addition to being countercultural, that's part of what makes it fascinating. But it is something Pastor Dan has brought up many times in his sermon. So it seems like it's just a relevant thing to our church culture. Hopefully it is for you listening. Mm-hmm. So Kelsey, let's dive in to the book. Mm-hmm. I remember you said in our conversation prior to the last episode that you read this book in like a week.
Oh, no, 3 days.
3 days. You read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry in 3 days.
Exactly. That's the title right there.
The great irony of that. But I understand my wife is also a very fast reader. So tell us about this book. Clearly, it was a page turner for you.
Yes.
Why? What stuck out for you and how did it affect your life?
Yeah. So to make myself sound a little less crazy, in my defense, or offense, if you will, because it doesn't really necessarily help the case, but I was actually recovering from a hip replacement surgery.
That's right.
I'm 30, so I know it's not very common, and to take, a 30-year-old out of regular life in general, and I am also a very active person. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it stood out because I knew I was going to go through this experience, and my surgeon, the way he approaches this surgery is for the first 2 weeks post-op, he doesn't want you to move. I mean, get up and down when you have to get water, go to the bathroom, things like that. But it is very important to use those first 2 weeks to truly rest because he works with a lot of young athletes. That's what he prefers. He almost has a cutoff age for people he is willing to see because he wants to get these people back to the life they were living. Yeah. Kind of understands too that we are young. We have these ambitions and motivations that are a little bit different if you were to get your hip replaced at a normal age. But I think in essence too, he's like, you'll get back to where you were. Rest. Use this time to rest. So yes. in my defense, I had nothing else to do to read this book. So my in-laws... And
you were already put into something that's countercultural for you, being very active, very athletic. Now you have, how long was it again? 2 months, 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Just
rest. Yeah.
Just rest. No movements.
Yes.
Are you allowed to get out of the bed, or you just?
Yes. No, I'm not bedridden.
Subtle movements.
Yeah, subtle movements. Be nice to your hip. You're allowed to put weight on it the second you wake up from surgery. So I mean, it's a very interesting surgery. But so you want to use it, but let's be nice to it.
Yes. No running.
Exactly. So in my in-laws were visiting for the weekend, and I had this book, and it's actually my dad. So thanks, Dad. But he's read it before, great conversations with him about it. And so I started reading it, and they were doing a bunch of yard work, and I was just sitting out there in my little chair and can't do anything. So I just read and kept reading and reading. So it's very engaging. And the way John Mark writes is very capturing and really, he speaks to you. It feels like you are engaged in what he is saying.
Yeah,
so
it's a conversation almost.
Exactly. And so I did read it in 3 days, and I was like, that was amazing. But not exactly how the book is supposed to be ingested, I believe. So,
right. Or certainly not the pace at which you walk away.
Exactly.
From it.
I wasn't necessarily ruthlessly eliminating hurry, but I wasn't helping myself. But so anyway, then my husband and I decided to actually read it together after the fact. So he he reads just right before bed. So some nights he reads 2 pages before the book falls on his face, and some nights he reads 10. So
it sounds like me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I read.
So we decided we would start reading it, and we kind of created our own little book club. And so he would read however much he read that night, and then the next day I read up to him. And then it was just kind of like a little, he would read some, I'd catch up to him. He'd read some, I'd catch up to him.
And I need to remember this trick. My wife will outread me.
Yes.
If we try to read a book together, she'll be done in a week. And I'll be like, wow, that first chapter. Whoa,
let's talk about that. Yeah. So we set this precedent so that we'd have a certain amount of content to then discuss at the end of the day. So we would have intentional discussions when he would get home from work and talk about what we got from the book that day. And so it became much more of a lived experience the second time through.
Yeah.
But it was obviously I got something different out of it than that time. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. It was, Lee was the one who wanted to read it first. And then when I had it, he was still finishing his other book. So I was like, I'll just read it. So it was not anything I was necessarily seeking, but I needed a new book. And it was the book that kind of fell into my hands and spoke very much to obviously where I was in life at the time and still living through a little bit. But it's just a very, like you said, a very countercultural book and perspective on life.
Yeah.
But it really does get into a way that culture is kind of moving away from what the heart of how we should be living. And we do live in this. It's funny you start this, the opening of this is talking about the chaos. And it's a chaotic world because people value hurry and people value this. If you are not busy, you are not important. And, it's just so interesting to me because that makes me now anxious to think about being that busy instead of the opposite when a lot of people get like anxious if they're too idle. So, it's just it's a different way to approach life.
So let's dive in then to that approach. What were some of the things in the book that stuck out to you that you'd like immediately hit you and went, ooh, he just described me, or things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll even preface it and say, I myself am not a busy person. Like I often say that like Lee and I don't have very busy lives. We don't have kids, so we're not off to however many practices or anything. It's just he and I and our dog right now.
Right.
But I had a very busy mind. So for me, this book even hit a little bit differently than I think a general audience would take it because I don't have a very demanding job. I don't have all these other responsibilities outside myself that I'm trying to tend to, but it's the way I handled my entire life and how I handled thinking about life in general, and almost even got stuck in this paradigm that I'm not a busy person because I am not important and I don't have people that need me and I'm not needed and I'm not giving value to this world. And I really lived in that and always felt that like, frustrated with myself because I wasn't busy but then I didn't ever want to be busy. I always felt that as a kid, even like I didn't want to go to college because I did, but like the thought of college was like, that's not me. The style of that, like I just kind of always had a different approach to how I wanted to view life. But then you get sucked into what everyone else is doing and what people are telling you is important and what is successful. And so, for me, this book was a lot more mental. And a lot of kind of what hit me is just how it for me, it was a lot more about faith overall, which I know we'll discuss in a second too. But it was like who you are becoming is what you're giving your attention to. So for me, my attention was always looming over everything I was anxious about and everything that was bothering me, everything I wanted to fix. So I lived in this world where I was constantly out to fix something. Nothing could ever be right. I couldn't just live and embrace what was happening in the moment. I wasn't present. I wasn't a present person. And I often reflect back now onto how I was back in my early 20s and things when you're especially kind of struggling with identity. And at least for me, I know not everyone does, but just, who am I if I'm not these cultural things? And so I've just had to really shift my paradigm in this of like, it's okay to be still, and it's okay to not be busy if my life isn't a standard kind of busy.
Yeah.
And so, the quote that John Mark Comer pulls from his mentor, who then pulled from Dallas Willard, is you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And so it is a lot more than just external hurry. And John Mark does talk about that. It's very mental as well.
Well, that makes sense. And that was a different video I had watched that wasn't about productivity, but it was just about the importance of being bored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something he points out in the book.
He does,
A gentleman pointed out in this video that like anxiety, depression, all of these things are on the rise. Mm-hmm. Yet we've supposedly never been more connected.
Mm-hmm.
We've supposedly never had more at our fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
And they're pointing out that this is actually too much.
Right.
That it leads to, or if the bored part, let me start there.
Mm-hmm.
The bored part was that it's important to be bored.
Yes.
From time to time, because if you're never bored, you never contemplate anything.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never answer life's biggest questions. You'll never look into what does my life mean? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Because if we're just constantly entertained, I mean, he pointed out, we're at a crosswalk for more than 2 seconds. Our phone comes out of our pockets.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I've done it where I've been bored for more than 2 seconds and I've either pulled out my phone or caught myself pulling out my phone and was like, no, I can be bored. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you never answer those questions, if you never look at what's the purpose of my life, what's the direction of my life, why am I doing what I'm doing, well, then there's no weight behind what you're doing.
Right.
And so we're overstimulated, underconnected, because we don't have a connection with people in healthy, meaningful ways as much as we used to.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly are losing our connection to God because that only comes from being still and spending time with God, which requires this separating yourself from all the busy thoughts in your mind. And so if we're never bored, we're never taking that pause to detach ourselves from all of our media and constant contact and constant entertainment, then suddenly, despite being completely fed, completely entertained and satisfied in every material way, we are more depressed, more anxious, more medicated than any generation prior. So let's then, it sounded like the faith part hits you a bit.
Yeah.
And we're kind of going in that direction. Talk about that. How did this then impact your faith? You've recognized that on a mental scope, and I think it's definitely true for me, always trying to fix something, always have something running in the back of your mind, and that anxiety surfaces in our daily lives. So then how did this hit you? What did it change?
Yeah. So like I was saying, I was recovering from a hip replacement surgery, which, to not go into all the details, was it was a not fun time to have to kind of come to that conclusion, but it was where I had to live. And the first 2 weeks I felt kind of very validated that I was where I was in this recovery. Like I couldn't move. I was very restricted in a lot of things. And then, but I was like, this makes sense. I just had metal shoved down my femur like 24 hours ago. I think it's probably okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I can take it easy for a little bit.
Exactly. Like, fair enough, Kelsey. That's fine. But then it was like weeks 3 and 4, I fell back into this self-pity and this mental state of why me? Why this? Why did it have to come to this? Very self-consumed. And I was really living in this just this cloud of feeling like all of this was happening to me. Ooh. And I'm very good at, I was very, well, I like to believe I am better now, but that is where I lived a lot of my life. It was all happening to me. I didn't understand it. I didn't ever feel like God was present or God was talking to me. And one of the things I love that he pulled out, he's like, maybe the issue is not that God is not present. God is always present. Yeah. Maybe the issue is that we are not still enough to see his presence. Amen. And so we live in this world that is always noisy and always going on. And we are always having to do something to prove ourselves. And we get so caught up in our own thoughts and our own beliefs and trying to figure all this out for ourselves that, like, when these thoughts keep going in my mind of how do I fix it? How do I fix it? What I'm not doing is giving that space for God to come in and talk. And it's like any basic conversation. I mean, prayer is a conversation with God. We have a relationship with God. Relationships build with conversation. It's how you get to know the other person. But when you're in a conversation with someone and that person doesn't give you the opportunity to talk, I think 99% of people out there get a little frustrated with that because there's no room for a back and forth.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a very one-way street relationship. And that's where I felt like I was living, is I would have these, I felt like I was doing all the right steps of having my devotional time in the morning and reading my Bible and having this guided prayer. But in those moments, all I was doing was seeking the answer. Mm-hmm. I wasn't allowing myself just to embrace that stillness. Yeah. And one of my favorite things my dad has told me, and he wasn't even using it to actually teach me, but it was, I think about it all the time. My dad is a pastor, and pastors love to hang out with each other. And so he would get together with this other group of pastors, and it was I believe he said it was a weekly Thursday morning breakfast or something. And so he said, sometimes we'd go and it was breakfast. It was fine. Nothing really happened. But every once in a while, they would get this really amazing conversation, and things would happen, and someone would be vulnerable, and someone would open up, and this group would come together, and they would be there for this moment. And he said the only reason why those moments happened is because we showed up every week, no matter what the conversation was. Never if last week was boring and nothing exciting happened, we showed up the next week. And it's about that constant showing up. Yeah. And that struck me so hard. And it just because I have these moments of silence doesn't mean all of a sudden God is going to speak and zap me into salvation. Right. It's the consistency. It's the obedience to show up. It's the willingness to not hear anything. And so for me, it was like, Kelsey, calm your thoughts. I always called myself type A, which I can be, but I felt like it was almost my excuse of the way I was, and not allowing myself to be challenged to think of my life in a different perspective, or live my life in a different perspective. I don't have, just because I'm type A, quote unquote, doesn't mean I still can't learn to be still. And that's more of an excuse. And so this book was just, the way he approached just the moments of stillness was like, it gave, if you are not giving God that space to come to you, then you are not going to hear him. Yeah. So for me, it was taking my devotional time, the moments I read my Bible, my moments of stillness and quiet with God in the morning looked very different. And granted, I had that too with my surgery. I mean, I had plethora of time. And so I would sit out back and I would sit on our one couch out there and just honestly sit for 20, 30 minutes with nothing. Just let nature be nature. Oh, wow. And it was some of the most, it was the thing I looked forward to the most, of just sitting there. And I would have thoughts of like, can you believe the birds? Like, look at the bird. They are just flying. Like, that's crazy. Can you think about a life where all you do, like, you just are flying? Like, these thoughts, like you were saying, just enter your mind, and you see the beauty that is just around, of things just acting how they need to act because it's nature, and hearing things that you don't hear unless you are completely still. And we don't live in a big city, so we don't have these city noises. I mean, sure, I live next to kind of a busier street, but like, you don't hear the cars all the time. You hear the nature that's around, and just like letting myself just be in that moment. And sometimes it would just be silence. Not a single thought would come into my head, but it was great. It stilled me, and it made me approach my recovery a lot different, where it wasn't this self-pity anymore. It was this new approach of like, okay, God, what do you want out of this? What am I getting from out of this that you're trying to help me get? Like, what am I giving to you from this journey and this experience? And so that's kind of, I still keep that there every morning. I start, during my recovery, I started an expositional commentary on Romans, which sounds very bougie, but no, I honestly, I love Romans. Romans is a great book. Honestly, I'm really obsessed with it. So I started this other, not quite an expositional commentary, but this other book commentary on Romans as well. And, that's how I start my morning, and, just what he was revealing through Romans, even, because Romans is, I mean, it really takes you on a roller coaster, but it, especially in chapter 8, when he talks about, this is life in Christ. This is life with the Spirit. The same Spirit in Jesus is the Spirit in you. That Spirit in Jesus is still. That Spirit in Jesus was was calm. And this is, this is how life looks like, because Jesus had peace and joy and love. And John Mark Comer points out in his book that those three characteristics are not compatible with hurry, because they take time and they take patience and they take stillness to let those things envelop you.
Yeah.
And when you're not giving that space, you can't find the beauty in those. And that's who Jesus was. And we're supposed to be following this way of Jesus. So you think you're too busy to be still. Jesus was still. And I guess you could put yourself above Jesus. I would not attempt to, but I just think, he took these very intentional moments in his life to go to his Father, who he had a very direct line with, the closest relationship you could have with God. And he still took those moments to seek him out, to be still and be like, I could access God anytime I wanted, but I'm going away from the chaos that is around me so I can seek God in his presence and just that relationship.
Yeah. I love what you said there. Seek God and his presence basically for the sake of it. I think it's far too easy for us to seek God only when we need something, when the reality is God is the thing that we really need. It kind of strikes me that really when this crazy life is all said and done, God is all we'll be left with. We will meet God, and if we've been seeking him with our life, and that is what we desire, then that's going to be a very exciting day for us. But if not, then, well, I guess maybe that day won't be as exciting. So I think we'll go ahead, though, with that stark thought, we'll go ahead and pause here and continue this conversation on the next episode of Equipped in Grace, when we'll be joined again by Kelsey Luckasevic, and we will continue unpacking the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and her experiences with it. Before we go, I would like to thank you, Kelsey, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you on, and we appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Second, I also want to thank you, dear listeners, for joining us today. We hope our conversation has been a blessing to you and your walk of faith. And if it has, then we invite you back in 2 weeks for our next episode, which will premiere on October 29th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. To be notified of our latest episodes, we do recommend following or subscribing to this show on the podcast app of your choice. Until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.